Today we'll be chatting about all things Point Mouillee State Game Area, one of Southeast Michigan's premier birding hotspots. A few housekeeping items before we get started. The presentation is being recorded. All participants will be muted for the duration of the webinar. Please take a moment to locate the participant and Q&A function on the Zoom platform. You may have to, on the bottom of your screen, go to the More button and click that to see the Q&A function. To send a question or comment, please use the Q&A. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Public lands provide ideal habitat for birds and other wildlife. Despite their benefits for wildlife and recreation, the conservation of public lands is at a crossroads. Historically, hunters have supported the conservation and management of the state's 150 wildlife and game areas. 150 plus, actually. As hunting declines, loss of funding poses a threat to the conservation of Michigan's public lands and waters, as well as the more than 450 bird species that rely on them for food, shelter, and breeding grounds. With birding on the rise, it's up to those who care about wildlife to engage with these spaces to provide essential support for them to thrive. Launched in 2016, MyBirds is an outreach and engagement program founded by Audubon Great Lakes and Michigan Department of Natural Resources that works to increase all Michiganders' engagement in the understanding, care, and stewardship of public lands that are important for birds and local communities. Audubon Great Lakes is a regional office of National Audubon, and we work across the 5 Great Lakes states to restore and protect birds and the places they need to thrive through on-the-ground conservation, engagement, and advocacy. Audubon scientists have identified the 12 most important coastal wetland regions across the Great Lakes that are most important to conserve or restore for vulnerable marsh birds. Michigan is home to 4 priority regions, including the nearby Detroit and St. Clair Flats priority region, where we are working on the ground to protect vulnerable secretive marsh birds like the black tern and least bittern and the places they need. So you may have felt it, you may have heard it, but it's officially spring, and that means birds are on the move. Today, we will learn about spring migration in Michigan as we explore Michigan's wetland wonders and all about Point Mouillee State Game Area, including how to access the area, what recreational opportunities exist here, what birds you can expect to find, tips to enhance your visit, and upcoming opportunities to tour the area. Now I'd like to introduce you to our guest speakers. Zach Cooley is a wildlife biologist for Michigan Department of Natural Resources. Ava Landgraf is Conservation and Research Coordinator for Detroit Bird Alliance. And Adam Shook is Wildlife Technician for Michigan Department of Natural Resources. I'm going to now turn things over to Ava.
Great. So we have spring upon us, like you said, and spring birding in Michigan is extra exciting because we are at the intersection of 2 of the main flyways, the Atlantic and Mississippi flyways, which brings in around 350 different species of birds to our area. And a lot of these birds you can see at Point Mouillee State Game Area. Spring's also exciting because the birds have their fresh breeding plumage. So the colors are there's more colors and brighter colors. Identification is easier with these. And then also birds are singing and calling to attract mates and mark territory. So it's a good time for birding by ear as well. In around April is when spring migration really gets going around here. And some of the birds that you'll start seeing in April include the golden-crowned and ruby-crowned kinglets. And then we do have the yellow-rumped warblers start coming through, many different sparrow species. We have the American woodcock is migrating through and also starting to do its little mating dance that it does. There's different field trips you can join to see that and some other areas for viewing the woodcocks. We also have different marsh birds and waterfowl migrating through and raptor migration as well. And then last, we have our hummingbirds start coming through. So April is a good time to start putting up your hummingbird feeders. Then in May, things are very exciting with a lot of the warblers coming through, which have really exciting colors and beautiful songs. And then also really amazing songs coming from thrushes and orioles that are migrating in May as well. So just a really exciting couple of months. But as we are enjoying migration, it's also important to think about the bird decline that we are facing across North America. 1 in 4 birds are gone since 1970, just a huge loss of individual birds. And this is in popular and more rare species, or more common species, which just shows that habitat and quality of habitat is declining and really affecting bird populations. This is occurring in every ecosystem and every type of bird. So we need to support these habitats like Point Mouillee, as well as appreciate them. Point Mouillee is also an important bird area, and these areas are, like stated, important for birds. They are designated by National Audubon and BirdLife International. Here in Michigan, we have 103 IBAs, 10 that are globally recognized. We also have Point Mouillee and a couple other Michigan DNR state and game wildlife areas that are recognized as important bird areas. These areas are open to the public and are managed for multiple uses and help protect species conservation for a lot of the species that are facing large declines, like mentioned before, black terns and least bitterns. So important to recognize and appreciate and support these areas. And I will now pass it over to Adam to talk about another important type of area.
Yeah, so my name is Adam Shook. I'm a wildlife technician, specifically at Point Mouillee for the Michigan DNR. To give you a little bit of background about what Point Mouillee is, we need to start at looking at it from like a statewide level. So within the DNR, there was a giant campaign a number of years ago to highlight our wetland wonders. So that's what this is right here. Wetland wonders are Michigan's premier managed waterfowl hunt areas. We do have a couple of those that are that do have designated hunts in the fall for waterfowl, but a couple that are also open to the public year-round throughout the rest of the state. And I'll highlight which ones those are later. But these areas were provided to create exceptional waterfowl hunting opportunities. However, they do offer a lot of other opportunities as far as and many other types of recreation. They're managed to provide waterfowl habitat for nesting and migration and for the benefit of other wetland wildlife. While these areas are funded by hunting license fees, they are free and open for anyone to visit, use, and enjoy most of the year. That is important because as of right now, as Ava and Emily just outlined, how hunting is declining, the hunters are still providing the bulk of the funding for these areas. However, looking into the future, there are plenty of opportunities for everybody to get involved to help protect these critical ecosystems. And then looking specifically at our managed waterfowl hunting areas, there are 7 of them. Those are us here at Point Mouillee, the Harsons Island at the St. Clair Flats, the Shiawassee River State Game Area, Fish Point State Wildlife Area, Nine Point State Wildlife Area, Fenville Farm over in Allegan, and then the Muskegon County Resource Recovery Center. Those are the 7 that are specifically our managed waterfowl hunting areas, whereas these other areas, Houghton Lake, Muniscong, and Portage Marsh, and Maple River, those are all managed very similarly to Point Mouillee in terms of intensive impounded management, so that we can try to keep what we have for these wetlands. It's important because they do double as Audubon important bird areas, which is, I'm sure, why a lot of people are here. We do have more than just waterfowl at these areas. They're well known for supporting breeding populations of vulnerable marsh birds, such as black tern, least bittern. One of the big ones that we have at Point Mouillee is the king rail as well. And then they're also known for supporting high concentrations of waterfowl during the migration and winter. In the fall, we typically see somewhere close to up to about 10,000 birds in just our refuge counts. The refuge is smaller than the area as a whole. So just keeping that in mind, there are many more than just 10,000 birds out there, but we do peak at that in those counts. And then just outside of the game area in the Huron River Delta and the Detroit, and where the Detroit River flows into Lake Erie, we have seen upwards over 100,000 divers in that river system as those diver birds are moving through.
Great. So, like you said, there's a lot of birds over at Point Mouillee, not just the waterfowl. We also have shorebirds and songbirds. Like we have listed here are just a couple of the exciting species that you can see. And then if we go on to the next slide, we also have on the waterfowl, like mentioned, a lot of overwintering waterfowl, and then other exciting species that people come out to see, such as the white pelican, the black-crowned night heron, and the black tern. So lots of great birds that you can see over here. Just a great marsh habitat for attracting all of these species. Apart from birds, there are other animals as well. First we have our vagrants and rarities. So there's also exciting birds that are much more rare, that are, some like Eurasian species and species that are far off the regular path. But come over here and end up here because it's a good source of food. So yeah, very, very exciting species like we have pictured here. We have the white wagtail on the right side, and the common redshank, both spotted at Point Mouillee. And the common redshank is the one in the middle, and the blackneck still is on the right. So all exciting species. You can head out there and you just never know what you're going to see. Then apart from birds, there is a lot of other wildlife as well. Many mammals that you can see. There's also upland game birds, and then a lot of different reptiles and amphibians. I think some of the most exciting species are the Blanding's turtle and the eastern fox snake. And then depending on what time of year you are there, you can hear some of the frogs and toads as well. So all very exciting stuff, even apart from the birds. And then next, we do have some ID for everybody to take part in. So if you want to take a look at the bird we have here, we're starting off with a little bit of a tricky one. So yeah, we'll just give it maybe 30 seconds or until this people kind of submission of answers start to slow down. I will let everybody know what the answer is. Okay, we are starting to slow down a bit, so I will just say that a lot of people know that the difference between the mute swan and the other swans is the orange versus black bill. So we know that this is not a mute swan because it doesn't have the orange bill, but it is still pretty tricky to tell whether it is a tundra swan or a trumpeter swan. But there's a couple pieces that you can look at, such as like the shape of the bill and the amount of kind of like the black facial skin that is between the bill and the eye. The trumpeter swan generally has more of that. So some tricky but helpful cues that you can use. So again, the correct answer for this one is the trumpeter swan. Great one to know, very important bird out at Point Mouillee. And we'll go on to the next one. All right, and I'll give everybody some time to answer this one. All right, we are starting to slow down a bit. Great. So this is a very exciting species that can be seen out at Point Mouillee. It is the American white pelican. So it has that classic pelican shape, the pelican bill that's very large. And then also you can see on these that they have the little nub on their bills that is for breeding. So yeah, the correct answer is the American white pelican. Good job, everyone. We can go on to the next question. Here is one of the waterfowl that you can see. Okay, we've reached 60% and it's slowing down a bit. So this is a one of the dabbler ducks, so ducks that are found in shallower water. And this can be a little tricky because we have green-winged teal and blue-winged teal as an option. And there's both blue and green on this wing, but it is a blue-winged teal with that kind of chalky blue color. And one of the identifying field marks is that white crescent shape on the face. So that is a good thing to look for. You can't see it on this bird, but they do also have quite like a spotty belly. So the ducks can get a little confusing for sure, but there's a couple good field marks for the blue-winged teal to help you identify that one. All right, this is another tricky one to me. I will give you guys some time. Okay, and we've reached 60% and we are slowing down a bit. So what we have here is the red-breasted merganser, and this is a male. The hooded merganser is black and white, so we can cancel out that one. And then the females and the males of the red-breasted merganser both have kind of that shaggy mohawk or crest on their head. and have a more defined kind of cinnamon colored chest. The common merganser male doesn't have the crest, and the common mergansers have like a little bit more of a defined white on their neck. That is something you can look for. But a very, very fun bird to see, the mergansers with their really cool bills. Another great bird that you can see out at Point Mouillee. Okay, next one. This is one of my favorite birds. Okay. Okay, so this here is an American coot. It is very similar looking to the common gallinule, but the gallinule has more colorful face, whereas the American coot has the white. And our next bird here, yes, chicken-like bird, very cute, very distinct feet as well, to allow them to walk on the marsh. And then we have another marsh bird coming up next. Okay. So the bird that we have here is the Virginia rail. A little tricky throwing the gray-faced rail in here, but this is the Virginia rail, which is probably the most common rail that we have around here. It does have a gray face and the kind of rusty reddish color. But you can also see it has the kind of striped black and white under the wing, and a noticeable little bit longer beak. So yep, Virginia rail. This is a good one to know the call of too, because sometimes they can be a little talkative as well. So another great bird. All right, and that is what we have for our bird ID. I hope that helped everybody brush up a little and get ready for spring. And we will go on to the next section.
Yep. So the best thing to do with this slide is if you are watching like on your iPad or on your phone, take a screenshot right now. The other thing you can do is just take a picture of the screen. I know it's getting recorded, so you can go back and visit it later. But these are the best ways to find where Point Mouillee is at and how to get a hold of people to talk about it. One thing that I do want to mention here is that we do have the office line here. We do only have 3 full-time staff working out of this office. It is Zach, myself, and we have a full-time wildlife assistant who works here as well. 3 full-time staff to work in an office and manage close to 13,000 acres throughout 3 counties is a lot. So you may not get a hold of us by calling that line right away. That's why I wanted to put in there the calls for Detroit Customer Service Center and just the general wildlife line in Lansing. They may be able to answer some general questions for you if it's very Point Mouillee specific. That information will get routed to us and we will be able to reach you. But if you need an immediate answer, try some of those lines first. And then there is a link down there. I know it's not spelled out, but it's the State of Michigan DNR Point Mouillee webpage. That can be found on the DNR website online. As I had mentioned, we do have 3 full-time staff. And then we do get additional seasonal staff, typically about 3 or 4 in the summer and then 1 in the fall. We cover wildlife issues in Wayne, Monroe, and Lenawee counties, as well as manage 6 different game areas, including here at Point Mouillee, the Point of Poe State Game Area, in the Newport area, Erie State Game Area along the Lake Erie coast, down in the southeast corner of Monroe County, the Petersburg State Game Area out just south of Dundee, west of US 23, the Crystal Water State Game Area out in Milan, in northwestern Monroe County, and then also a small portion of the Brownstown Prairie, over in Brownstown. Some things to think about if you're going to visit Point Mouillee. We do have a lot of things to offer, but one thing I do want to make clear for everybody right off the bat is that Point Mouillee is a state game area. It is not a state park. So you will not find all of the amenities that you would find at, say, like Sterling State Park right down the road, or the Lake Erie Metro Park just to the north of us. It's more of a primitive kind of outdoor experience, though it is highly infrastructured with all of the dikes and everything. It is pretty primitive in terms of amenities. So kind of be prepared for that as you're going out. We do have 2 viewing platforms with a 3rd in progress. This picture here to the left is our boat launch / viewing platform, right at our office here. That viewing platform will overlook the Huron River Delta, where it comes into Lake Erie, and then the Detroit River, where that comes in on the east side. There is another viewing platform in zone 11 of our Nelson unit. That one is in a agriculture field, so you're probably not going to see a whole lot of variety there. But that doubles as a viewing platform and a handicap accessible hunting blind. And then we are getting a 3rd one in progress. Hopefully we'll be within the next year or so. That's in partnership with the Point Mouillee Waterfowl Festival. They also built the one in zone 11, but this new one will go in zone 22 of the Walpattich unit. That'll provide a little bit more year-round viewing opportunity, as it will be in kind of a marshy, moist soil area where we do commonly see waterfowl and shorebirds in that area throughout pretty much the entire year. Do have 2 paved boat launches. This one here at the office that is more suitable for bigger boats if you do want to do that. And there is one down at the south end of the game area at the dead end of Roberts Road that will launch directly into Humphreys. Probably want a smaller boat if you're going to use a motorized boat there. There are multiple areas to launch a canoe or kayak as well. You can pretty much do that from anywhere to be able to access the game area. There are 27 miles of dikes for walking and non-motorized biking. So we do put that in there about non-motorized. I know e-bikes are kind of the craze right now. However, it is written into our conservation order that no motor or mechanically driven vehicles, aside from work vehicles, are allowed to be used. So if you do bring an e-bike, just know that it cannot be under power if you are using it out there. There's also plenty of other recreation opportunities, including hunting, trapping, fishing, birding, and wildlife viewing. There's 8 established parking lots and other roadside parking. This all pretty much along the west end of the game area. That's how you would access most everything at Point Mouillee. This is a big one. Like I said, with the limited staff that we do have here, we're not always at the office, and it is hard to keep up on the cleaning of bathrooms. So we do have a porta-john restroom at the headquarters. So if you do need to utilize that, you can go there. We are working with the Audubon Society and Detroit Bird Alliance to hopefully get some porta-johns out on the game area for the summer. So we're working on that. I can't promise it yet, but we are working on making that better. And then some other big tips, because as you can see, there's not a lot of trees on the game area. Make sure you wear your sunscreen, bring a lot of water, prepare for bugs, especially if you're going out at dusk or daylight, and make sure you please take your trash with you. We do not have trash cans out in the game area, so anything you take in, please do take out. And then this is also a big thing because there are date closures for the game area when it comes around to hunting season. This is not because we want to keep people out. This is mainly just a safety thing for everybody. This is a very, very highly trafficked waterfowl hunting area during waterfowl hunting season. So we do just want to make sure that safety is in mind for this. So the entire game area is open from January 2nd to August 31st. The refuge, managed hunting units, and surrounding dikes are closed to general entry from September 1st to January 1st. So this would be anything in red or the green hash marks or the little yellow and with red hashes in the middle of the map there. These are all closed for general entry during that time period. Those are obviously where the refuge is, and that's where we do have some our managed waterfowl hunting operations. So those dikes that surround those are closed for that time. However, you may access anything along the west there, along the Mouillee Creek unit, the Bad Creek unit. The best place of access for that would be down there at the south end of the Bad Creek. You can walk all the way up to that south end of those closed units, but you cannot go past those. We do have what's called a Vermet access permit. We do allow that if you are a properly registered waterfowl, if you have your proper waterfowl hunting licenses, to be able to walk the North Causeway along the Nelson unit, Long Pond unit up there along the river. We do ask people to use discretion with that. If you do purchase those licenses, is to not go out there on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, because that's when those hunting operations are going on. But that is an option, even if you don't hunt, but you still purchase those licenses. That is a way to access the game area during that time. And as always, I'm sure many of you do take this precaution, but not just at Point Mouillee, anywhere. We do recommend wearing hunter orange September 1st to January 1st, because that is when active hunting seasons are going on in this state.
All right. So we'll talk a little bit more about Point Mouillee here now. Point Mouillee is a historic marsh with an interesting history. I'll go through this as fast as I can. We could probably spend a half hour talking about how Point Mouillee came about. But basically, what forms the Point Mouillee, what used to form the Point Mouillee marsh, was sediment coming down from the Huron and the Detroit River, forming a barrier island and protecting the marsh behind it. And as dams were put in on the Huron River and the seawalls were armored up the Detroit River and the Huron River, that sediment stopped coming down and being deposited. And over time, with high water and storms on Lake Erie, the barrier island that protected the marsh was washed away. And by the late 60s, probably close to 80% of the marsh was gone. It was just open like it was part of the lake. So in the late 70s, conservation groups in the area and the DNR got together and with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the idea for the confined disposal facility was brought about. And basically it mimics where the old barrier island was, and the CDF was built to put the dredge from the shipping channels from the Detroit and the Rouge River, and that is what protects the marsh now. And after that was built, then all the other interior dikes were built. So everything out there now is man-made. We were the ones that ended up destroying it when we put in the dams and armored the seawalls, and we're the ones that have brought it back to what it is now today. So that's a quick history of why it's out there, what all the dikes are. Specifically about some land management, Point Mouillee Managed Waterfowl Hunt Area is 5,195 acres. It's made up of both wetland units and agricultural units, which act as food plots and resting areas for the migratory waterfowl. Each spring, we plant corn and buckwheat and millet, which act like big food plots. And then all these units are impounded so we can flood them. We have water control structures and control the water levels in them. There's 10 units on the game area, and we control the water levels in 9 of them. And then we also do some Phragmites and invasive species work pretty regularly out there. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. What you see in the pictures here, the bottom picture is alternating strips of corn and buckwheat, and the picture of the buckwheat's flowering. That's why it looks white. And then the top picture is in the fall when the corn has died and the unit's flooded. The waterfowl absolutely love. They just pile into the small grains and in the corn. But although waterfowl love the egg units, it's a very small part of what Point Mouillee is and what we do out there. So if you go to the next slide. And so this talk it's steered toward birding, but we want to explain the managed hunting just operations, just so people are aware of what's going on out there. The managed hunting units in the dikes, like Adam had said, are closed for hunting from September 1st to January 1st. We have 21 managed zones throughout the Long Pond, Nelson, and Walpatich units, and just 7 of them are agriculture zones. So overall, only 13% of Point Mouillee is used for managed hunting and managed hunting refuge operations. The refuge is made up of the Bloody Run unit and the Launchslogger unit. And so between all those units in the managed hunting area, agriculture makes up less than 3% of our total acreage on the game area, and less than 1% of that is actually planted to corn. The other 1.78% is small grains, the buckwheat and the millet. So Point Mouillee is mainly managed as a cattail marsh, moist soil, open water, and transition areas. It's really, we try to make it as natural, mimic as natural as possible within the dike walls. So in these pictures here, the top picture is the Walpatich unit. The majority of the Walpatich is managed as a marsh. It's mainly on the east side. The topography, it's much higher ground on the west side of that unit. So there's a couple areas that are put into agriculture, but the majority of the Walpatich unit is in a natural cattail marsh. And then the bottom picture, the bottom picture is the Humphreys unit, which is 1,100 acres of open water marsh habitat. On the next slide. So for habitat management out there, the focus is a lot on maintaining a hemi-marsh standard in our marsh units. We also promote the desired vegetation growth and wetland features by timing drawdowns when they're needed. We don't always do them. Sometimes it may be 2 or 3 years before we have to mess with the water levels. But so the bottom left picture here is our new pump station. It was just completed this last year. Before that, it had been down for 6 years, and we didn't have water control during that time. It was that's a whole nother story. It was COVID and having to bid it out and not having enough money and needing more money, and it just took a long time to get done. But finally, we have 2 vertical electric pumps that are capable of moving 10,000 gallons per minute each. It's the heart of the area and controls water and all of the units except for Mouillee Creek unit and the moist soil complex. The 2 pictures here with the boat and the machine is our underwater cutter. We use this to kind of keep some of those hemi-marsh areas open water. Mainly, we have problems with flowering rush coming up in some of those openings, and this helps us cut those back and keep those open water. So. And then the final picture here on the right, you can see the open water openings. These are all areas that were dominated by Phragmites at one time. And Adam did a great job of getting the Phragmites under control in these areas and returning them to some beautiful open water marsh areas. And so the last habitat management that we'll highlight here is our soon-to-be completed moist soil complex. There are 3 wetland restorations on the southwest corner of the Humphreys unit that make up this complex. The Bad Creek unit is the top right corner here that you're looking at. That was completed in 2014. The Cripple Point unit is the bottom right picture, and that was just finished in 2020. And then the left-hand picture here is the Point Sec unit that is being bid out, and hopefully construction for restoring that unit will start here this summer. They will form over 100 acres of moist soil management, and there's a walkable dike that goes all the way around these 3 units, and they're open year round for people to walk. You don't need a permit or anything to be out there. There is hunting that could be going on in those units, but it's not as intensive as the managed hunting area. The moist soil management isn't easy. It's time consuming and requires close monitoring, but it's a challenge that we're looking forward to, and we're excited about this complex being completed. All right, a couple more things here. There is some research and monitoring that goes on out there. We partner with a number of different groups, a lot of them being universities, but also the USGS Geological Survey. But these are just a quick highlight of a couple of them. Central Michigan University has done 2 different king rail studies just over probably the last 6 years. The most recent one was done by Dustin Brewer there. That's the one where they located the nesting king rails in the Long Pond unit. And then Ohio State University, they did a big study down at Winus Point, a rail study down there, and found a lot of their tagged birds were coming up this way to Point Mouillee. So they asked if they could have Motus towers here, and they maintained those for probably the last 8 years or so. They've taken them down just 2 years ago, I think. That was a pretty long running study. And then right now, Central Michigan University is currently doing a hydrologic water and soil sampling study for us. And then Eastern Michigan over the last 20 years has done all sorts of different Phragmites studies. They've been very active with their research out here. All right, so I think there was some questions in the chat about some different funding options. We could spend a whole nother webinar talking about funding. So this is just going to be a quick overview of it, but this is kind of from the Audubon's point of view, how the IBA is funded. The Audubon doesn't have a capacity to support the IBA conservation outright, rely on the partners and the landowners, which for a lot of them, as we talked about, is the wildlife. It comes down to the wildlife division. Each area, like Point Mouillee or Harson's Island, they're managed by a specific field office, and each field office has a yearly budget to do management on the lands it's responsible for. And as Adam said, we have a number of other game areas that we're responsible for, not just Point Mouillee. So the money for our budget kind of gets split up between all the different areas that we have to maintain. And that's how all the other managed waterfowl areas work also. And then my last part here is, again, a quick overview of financial stuff. So most of the wildlife division's funding doesn't come from the general fund. Very little general fund money is your property taxes, and very little general fund money goes towards habitat or maintenance on game areas. Almost all the wildlife division budget comes from hunting license sales through the Game and Fish Fund and the Pittman-Robertson Fund, which are an excise tax on guns and ammunition. This is just a very overview. We could spend a whole nother webinar talking about wildlife funding and budgets, but we are talking about license fee increases, ways to have other users help support these areas, whether it's a conservation stamp or there's a never-ending list of ideas. It's just that they're not all practical. Some are hard to even wrap your head around, but we are trying to work on something. It is very well known that the number of hunters is declining and the number of licenses sold is declining, and those are all things that used to help pay and support these areas. So that's the end of that one.
So yeah, that's an exhausting topic for us in the DNR. Where does the money come from? However, um, we know that these areas are important, and specifically at our wetland wonders areas, there we wanted to look at out into the future as to how we can manage these in the short term and also preserve them for the long term. So a few years ago, DNR Wildlife Division Work Group was charged with developing a 10-year strategic plan to define the priorities for both hunting and recreation and the habitat management of these areas. I was one of these work group members. It was a very long process. However, we did come up with what we think is a pretty good plan for how to manage areas going forward. So across all of the wetland wonders, we have these five fundamental objectives, which are: one, to maximize ecosystem function; two, to maximize waterfowl abundance and diversity; three, to maximize waterfowl hunting satisfaction; four, to maximize other recreation satisfaction; and five, to maximize our workload and our capacity as a DNR. So when we look at Point Mouillee specifically, what basically all of the areas got that big plan with those fundamental objectives, and then we were to look at that from each of our own standpoints at our own specific areas and come up with our plans as to how we can make this happen. So I know you've already seen this map before, but it is probably the best way to explain what is going, these six actions that we chose, where they would be happening. So number one, though corn planting is very minimal in our large scale of things at Point Mouillee, we are looking at the acreage reduction on that. So we've gone from planting very wide strips of corn to reducing that because there is not as much of a need when you look at duck energy days, which is basically the amount of food or the amount of energy coming out of the food that they eat. There's actually quite a bit more value to them eating the small grains, so reducing that corn would be better. We also want to establish high quality grass nesting areas. So this would happen in various areas throughout Point Mouillee. Probably a little bit hard to explain where they are on this map, but there are specific areas where those transition zones where good grasses come up for specifically something like the mallard for nesting. Mallards are continually losing their good nesting grounds all across the Great Lakes coastal marshes. So restoring those is one of our priorities here. We're also looking at rerouting the Mouillee Creek through the Humphreys unit. This would kind of restore the natural hydrology that was here. Right now, that Mouillee Creek runs along the west side of that dike that kind of does the weird curves along the west end. That would allow us to put a water control structure there towards where it says Mouillee Creek unit, and allow storm surge waters to flow into the Humphreys unit so that they can be filtered through a marsh before they go out to Lake Erie directly through basically that channel along the west end. We also are looking at rerouting our small pump house through our Long Pond unit. This is up there between Nelson and Long Pond, kind of that white dot right up at the top of the red. So what this would do is kind of help us filter our agriculture practices before they end up going out to the lake. So this would route that water from those ag units in Nelson and in the Bloody Run through Long Pond and then over to the big pump by Mouillee Creek. So it has a chance to filter that out, but also allow the Long Pond unit to basically thrive where those cattails can utilize those nutrients and before they go directly out to the lake. We'll also look at finishing and managing our south end moist soil complex. Zach kind of mentioned that in his talk. The Bad Creek, just to the south, that would be Cripple Point, and then Point Sec to the south. That's Zach touched on that already. And then add 2 moist soil zones to the west end of the Nelson unit. This is where a traditional agriculture field is, looking at possibly adding that moist soil, which is great habitat for shorebirds and for at all times of the year, and also for specifically nesting in that area. So.
We've learned a lot in a short amount of time. I'm going to share some ways to take action and some upcoming events before we open up the Q&A. Okay, we're missing a picture here, but I think the text is still relevant. So one of the best ways to take action is to go birding at a public land near you. By getting familiar with Michigan's public lands and the birds that depend on them, you'll be ready to support them as opportunities arise. You can explore one of Michigan's 103 IBAs, important bird areas, many of which are also public lands. Visit Audubon online for a list of IBAs near you. Of course, you can visit one of Michigan's 7 wetland wonders and check out Michigan's 12 birding trails. We heard a little bit about the American woodcock, and if you want to see one in action, you can visit a grouse enhanced management site, or GEMS. You can also directly support the conservation of public lands. The Non-Game Fish and Wildlife Trust Fund provides revenue to identify, protect, manage, and restore native plant and animal species and more. Grassland wildlife need your help to thrive. The Adopt a Game Area program allows you to sponsor habitat projects on state lands. You can also support local conservation organizations, including Point Mouillee Waterfowl Festival, Gibraltar Duck Hunters Association, Waterfowl USA, SWLEC, as well as the presenting organizations today, Audubon Great Lakes, Detroit Bird Alliance, and Michigan Department of Natural Resources. You can also be a champion for wetlands and advocate for their protection and restoration. Lots of fun events coming up this spring. So 2 events are taking place at Point Mouillee. The Detroit Bird Alliance Driving Birding Tour on Saturday, May 3rd. Tickets and information available at detroitbirdalliance.org. Michigan DNR will host a spring birding tour on Friday, May 9th. Visit Audubon Great Lakes online for more details.
Emily, can I add something about the Friday, May 9th? We're
Yes.
not actually hosting a tour per se as far as taking you out there. We will have our check station open and we'll be available to answer questions, look at maps with you, talk to you about the game area, anything you want to talk about. You can come into the check station and talk to us, and we can kind of get you on the direction to go out there. So it's more of an open house birding day for anybody that has any questions about Point Mouillee.
Thanks, Zach. Michigan DNR is also hosting some more events in partnership with My Birds. One is at Shiawassee River State Game Area. Another is at Fish Point State Wildlife Area, and more. There's a special woodcock walk at Lame Duck Foot Access Area, GEMS, near Gladwin, Michigan. And you can visit Audubon Great Lakes online and on Facebook for more information. We also invite you to join our next webinar, Demystifying Portage Marsh State Wildlife Area. So Portage Marsh is an important coastal wetland that provides a protected area for waterfowl and wetland species. We'll have another free lunch hour webinar to get to know this IBA and wetland wonder. So we now have a little bit of time for some questions, and we've received a number of questions through the Q&A function. So thank you to folks for submitting those. I wrote some down here. I'm going to pass it over to Zach, I think, or maybe Adam, but can you explain the moist soil area?
The area, or kind of what we're going to, moist soil, it's going to be managed as it's very shallow water. And then there's some different things you can do as far as management techniques, as far as drawdowns and scarifying, to try to get wetland vegetation, different wetland vegetation to grow in that shallow water. It's something new for us, and we're excited about having this over 100-acre area to try it out on. I don't know, Adam, you have anything you want to add to it?
No, I mean, I guess the one thing to reiterate that you did touch on when you were presenting it is that it is a difficult management practice. It is very intensive. It requires, intense drawdowns, also herbicide spraying to reduce unwanted vegetation, a lot of mechanical work to remove that vegetation as well. So it is exciting, but at the same time, it is a difficult practice to do. But like Zach said, it is something that we're excited to try, or not try, but we are going to do. And then we are actually going to be trained in this. We're going to a moist soil management workshop in September. It'll be taught by a guy by the name of Lee. Oh, I can't remember his name. But anyways, Lee Frederickson. Yep. He's been doing this his entire career, and I think his career started in the late 60s, early 70s. So we will be going to a workshop presented by him. So we'll be taught by an expert. So yeah.
Thank you both. We have some logistics questions about accessing Point Mouillee, so I'll just sort of give you these one by one. I'm thinking maybe Adam or Zach, you can jump in here. But are there walkways to view the area? So I know you mentioned a couple opportunities.
Yeah. So anytime throughout anytime from January 2nd to August 31st, you can walk any of the dikes on the game area. If you look at that map that was provided, you don't have to scroll all the way through, but you can find that map online. Anywhere there's a listed parking lot, it is close to where you can get where you can access to walk on any of those dikes around the game area. Those are, I guess, when we say walkways, that's what we mean. There's 27 miles of those dikes that are out there, which basically just surround the whole game area. There's nothing paved. It's all either gravel or grass. So keep that in mind when you are walking out there. And then just remember the date restrictions on where you can go. I know that is confusing as to where those closures are. So we definitely recommend, if you have the chance, to come in to the office on that May 9th, and we'll way better outline it for you as to where you can and can't go during those closed dates. But for the majority of the nice time of the year, you can go anywhere in the game.
Somebody asked about dogs too on the dikes. We do have a wildlife nesting period, which is April 15th to July 15th, when you have to have your dog on a leash. But outside of those dates, you do not have to have your dog leashed to go on a walk out there. And again, Adam talked about bikes and some too. Those are things that the Pittman-Robertson funds, the federal funds, they don't allow bikes on a lot of game areas, but because these dikes are basically gravel roads, the main reason for not allowing bikes is they have negative impacts to the natural resources. Because these dikes are gravel roads, riding a bike on there, it isn't negatively impacting the natural resource. So we do have some leeway in allowing those things. So just wanted to touch on that.
That's great. Yep. So related, are motorized wheelchairs allowed on the dikes?
Yes.
Thank you. We have a question. Are there any volunteer opportunities, such as removal of invasive species?
We don't have anything lined up right now. MUCC, the Michigan United Conservation Clubs, they have an on-the-ground program that we work with sometimes to do some work out here. So if we have opportunities come up, it will probably be through them and advertised through MUCC's on-the-ground program. So if you follow that, you'll get notified of anything that's going on out here.
Great, thank you. We have one question.
I can.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going
Adam.
to jump to that. I do know that I think they are working on it, but April or May 17th, MUCC is doing a cleanup day out here with Point Mouillee Waterfowl Festival. I don't know that the details are completely set, but if you are interested, I do believe that is the date that they are targeting to do a cleanup day out here for sure. So I just want to throw that out there. But people are more than welcome to come and clean up anytime you want to. We appreciate that.
That's a good reminder. Ava, a quick question. One of our participants was wondering, where did you say the rails were? So when we talked about Virginia rails.
Well, I know that they're one of our secretive marsh birds, so they can be very difficult to see. You kind of only see them if you get really lucky. They like to hide in the reeds. I feel like you're almost more likely to hear one than see one, but that's just my experience. Adam or Zach, if you want to add anything about like specifically where you can find them at Point Moo, I just know that hiding in the reeds is where I would expect to find them in general.
Was that the king rail you're talking about?
I think Virginia Rail,
Virginia rail.
Lee said, but maybe you could say both.
Well, what everybody always asks about is the king rail, and like I said, Central Michigan did that study out here, and that's when they identified the king rail that was nesting in the Long Pond unit, which again is one of our managed hunt zones, but it's like a beautiful cattail marsh. It's probably the most beautiful cattail marsh on the entire game area. But that was the Long Pond area, Long Pond unit, if you want to walk out that way this spring.
Thanks. Okay, we have time for one last question. So I'm going to open this up to anyone and everyone who wants to take it. Can you talk more about what is contributing to the decline in our bird populations and what we can do to help reduce this further? That's a lofty question.
I can speak a bit on that. The biggest factor affecting birds is habitat loss. So supporting these habitats is a huge thing that we need to do, and even creating more habitat, creating tiny pieces of habitat at home, by using native plants, making sure you don't have windows that birds are hitting. If you have a problematic window, like just a large window near vegetation, and you've seen like a bird or two hit that window, there's far more birds are actually hitting that window than you are seeing. So putting a deterrent on the window, and then also keeping cats inside. It's not fun to talk about, but cats are a huge factor in bird population decline. So those are kind of the three big ones that I think about most. If yeah, Zach or Adam, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Looking at it from more our perspective as the land managers here, it really highlights the importance of these highly infrastructured areas. If you look at why Point Mouillee washed away in the 70s, it's because of it's kind of counterintuitive, but because this is developed now, but the development of the river systems up the Huron River, up the Detroit River, we lost that. We lost the soil deposit here that kept the marsh together. And then one thing that's just going to keep on happening is those high water cycles. So that's why the marsh did wash away in the 70s. There was a very high water cycle like the one we went through here recently. If we did not have these highly infrastructured areas to protect these marshes, Point Mouillee may look like Lake Erie again if we didn't have that protection. It also provides us the opportunity to really manage these on a more smaller scale. It makes the management way more effective if we can focus on, say, 50 or 100 acres at a time, as opposed to one giant marsh at one time. So advocating for these important ecosystems that we have, and then also advocating for just acquiring more. I think we've lost over 95% of our coastal wetlands in the state of Michigan. So advocating for either, acquiring more or just working with, anybody who that could have some pull with restoring coastal wetlands, even if it's not state or federal property on coastal wetlands. So.
Emily, there was one other question that I want to touch on because somewhere along the line we never said it, but the game area is closed from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. But outside of that, you can go out there whenever you want. You don't have to check in at the office here or anything like that. If you're just going out there to walk around, it opens up at 4 a.m.
All right, thanks, Zach. So, and thanks to all our presenters for speaking and answering those questions. Thanks to everyone for joining us today and submitting your questions. You can stay in touch with MyBirds by visiting us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. And this concludes the webinar. So thank you all for attending. We hope that you have learned and enjoyed this presentation.